true exercise and true Hatha Yoga, which is the physical component of yoga. You know, all those twinkling, twangly postural things. What actually is it, and what is the most effective ways to reap the benefits and achieve the aims of exercise? Welcome to the Vital Veda Show. Immerse in a shared experience with me of exploring exciting realms of holistic health and the rich, expansive field of consciousness of which underlies and encompasses everything. It is here that we explore the essence of what health and vitality truly is. Get ready to discover how to enliven your ultimate potential for health and to live a life in a frictionless flow while achieving more. You deserve to feel vitality. As a matter of fact, it is innate within you. Hello there, this is Dylan Smith, Ayurvedic practitioner, holistic health educator, speaker, and just recently, podcaster. I run the Vital Veda Clinic in Sydney and travel around sharing this ancient knowledge and treatments face-to-face as well as online. Today we have a wonderful podcast with one of the top yoga masters in the world who has not only mastered yoga but also movement, exercise, breathing and pranayama. I'm fortunate enough to have him as my yoga teacher, however not so much anymore since he moved up the coast and is teaching more exclusively around the world. But specifically he has taught me Hatha Yoga, which is the physical component of yoga, and really revolutionized my yoga practices, as he does with many people. Although yoga is so much more than just the physical aspect, in this podcast, that's what we talk about, the physical aspect. It is the most common sort of yoga practiced by many, which is wonderful, but better off doing it right. Not just to reap the maximum benefits, but also to reduce damage to your body and nervous system. Simon is one of the highly regarded authorities in yoga, really in the world, and certainly in Australia today. Simon Borg-Olivier has been practicing yoga for 50 years and teaching for 35 years. He is also a registered physiotherapist for the past 20 years. He's the co-director of Yoga Synergy, one of the big yoga schools in Australia, a research scientist and university lecturer. He has regularly been invited to teach posture, movement and breathing at conferences and festivals internationally since 1990. He's one of the most beautiful humans I know. So fun, loving, kind, and humorous at times. Enjoy. So I'm here with Simon Borg-Olivier. So good to see you again.
Likewise, Dylan. Thank you. Pleasure to be here with you.
Yeah, just to paint a bit of a picture, we're up in the Byron Bay hinterland area in his beautiful home on a beautiful day. And yeah, I was very lucky to discover Simon early on in my yoga, my Hatha Yoga career and my Hatha Yoga practice, because I see Simon revolutionise a lot of people's yoga practice, and I'm lucky mine didn't have to get revolutionised. I was lucky enough to start early. But before we talk about that and you revolutionising people's yoga practice, which I've seen people who have been practicing for decades, and they come to the courses that I'm at and they're like, are you serious? This is the best? But I've been doing this for so long and I thought this yoga taught us this way and things like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll talk about that in a bit. I just want to first get a background of your story and how you got into this.
Okay, a background. Wow, many decades in a few moments. Look, I was very lucky to have great parents, and my mother, was my first teacher, embryo posture. She taught me, and the basic philosophy that I think is the most important thing of yoga. It's the philosophy of love, and that, basically for me, yoga is the recognition that we're one family in love, and that starts best with your parents, and if your parents are good, that helps, and my mother was wonderful for me. My father also was fantastic on that level, but he also gave me the first beginnings of what really forms a major part of my practice today, which is about the breath. He was a free diver, and so he taught me how to hold my breath and not breathe. And the funny thing about yoga in the West is that people think that yoga and exercise is about learning how to breathe more. But in India and in all yoga, we talk about yoga as the art of learning how not to breathe. And that's what he showed me, and I was very lucky to have that at a very early age. And I met also some other great teachers. When I was 8 years old, I had Basil Brown, who was an Olympic athlete, who taught me the Kriyas, especially Uddiyana Bandha and Nauli. And then in my late teens, I had a Tibetan Lama who took me on board as his student for some years. And then I began what for me was just some fitness classes in my early 20s, but then I realized it didn't really gel with me, and I started doing the Hatha Yoga practices as they were taught by B.K.S. Iyengar, Sri K. Patabi Joyce and Desika Char in my early 20s, and then actually traveled to meet these people in India in my 20s, and did my first teacher training course in my early 20s, and at that same time I was learning at university and studying biology at university, and I had these two very different lives. One is was this very mystical Eastern yoga path, and the other was a very straight Western science path. And at some point I realized that I was going in two different directions, and I finally managed to reconcile this by becoming an exercise-based physiotherapist in the early 1990s, and this was a very good move for me because it helped balance the two parts of my life, and still now, I think of my physiotherapy in a very good way, and sometimes people ask me, what am I teaching? And I'll say I'm teaching exercise-based physiotherapy in the form of yoga, or for other people I'll say I'm teaching classical Hatha Yoga with an understanding from modern exercise-based science and Western medical science. So to me they're merged as one inside me, and I'm very thankful for that. I've been really trying to develop this understanding for the last few decades, and in the last 10 years, I've had a nice influence with several Chinese teachers, including one who I'm still in regular contact with. His name is Master Zhen Huayang, and this influence from China made me realize actually that Indian yoga is an expression of the natural body that really is a good place to work with, and there's so much in common between Indian yoga, natural movement, and the movement and posture and energy systems of China. And so it's these natural systems that I'm trying to work with most, because I think that's the first step that people really need to get back to restore naturalness in their body, which is so lost in the modern West.
Yeah, and that's what you're doing. This is what the yoga synergy you've developed is, right? Is taking all these years of your experience and then all these different traditions and formulating kind of your own sequences to, as you said, yoga-based practice, physiotherapy, exercise-based.
Yes. Yeah. Sometimes people think of what we're teaching, these yoga synergy, which is my company, sequences, as being an expression of what I've learned. I think of it more in terms of Bianca Matchless, my business partner, and myself have developed an understanding of Western medical science, especially in the form of physiotherapy, and we've tried to apply that to help the Western modern non-natural body to access the teachings of the East, and we can use this understanding to actually improve any exercise form, and especially any yoga form. But when you really take an understanding of the applied anatomy and physiology of the body, and especially the modern Western body, then for us it was almost like the yoga synergy sequences just fell out, and it became, if you want to teach people how to do it, this is the best way of doing it. But we can apply the system to any system of yoga, and I teach regularly around the world. I'll teach people who only practice Iyengar yoga or Ashtanga yoga or Bikram yoga, and I'm happy to teach them their style and help them make it better. But if I'm teaching people fresh, I find there's an easier way of teaching most people most of the time for the best results on a physical level, physiological level, mental level over an ongoing period of time. And it was a pleasure having you in my classes, because you're an intelligent, bright person who, when I met you, you you were, quite a few years younger. And so it was just wonderful to have someone bright and intelligent who could work with something and receive it without having to tell you all the things that you have to unlearn first. Because, for me, it's quite easy to teach beginners, especially intelligent beginners. The most difficult thing I face around the world is just trying to get rid of the bad habits that people have got and the basic misunderstandings, the misconceptions people have about not just modern yoga, not just what yoga is meant to be, but also even exercise-based, science.
What are some of those habits, most common, started around the yoga?
A lot of people think that yoga and health is about learning how to stretch more, to tense more, to get your heart rate up more, to breathe more, whereas it's just so logical. And even the Western person with these misconceptions can logically see that a healthy person is someone who runs fast and makes their heart beat less, not more, who makes their breath less, not more breath when they're running fast, who actually can do something like like a rhythmic gymnast might do 20 backflips in a row and land in the splits, which obviously takes a lot of flexibility and stretch. But while they're doing it, the effortlessness and grace they're doing it with, and that whole parasympathetic, enjoyable, calming way they're doing it, tells you that they're not stretching or tensing muscles. They're just moving through what for them is a natural range of movement. And I think it's so important to recognize that if we're talking about yoga, we're talking essentially about a very loving place and a very connected place. And what connects you on a physiological level is the nervous system state, which technically is called the parasympathetic nervous system, which euphemistically is the state of rest, rejuvenation, and relaxation, as opposed to the sympathetic nervous system, which is commonly called the flight or fight response. And if you want to feel good and have the body working for longevity and health, you want to emphasize the parasympathetic nervous system, not the sympathetic nervous system, which will really be something that makes your body feel like it only has to live another 10 minutes to run away or fight, And in that state, the body's nervous system really tells the organ systems to shut down, and you turn off your immune system, reproductive system, digestive system, and you just turn on the systems for flight and fight, which on a subconscious level will make the body think it's going through a place where there is fear, anger, aggression, lack of safety, lack of trust as the dominant subconscious emotions, which doesn't sound like yoga at all to me, and it doesn't sound like a healthy place to be. Also, many people are regularly asking me things like, but if we don't stretch, if we don't strain our muscles, if we don't get our heart rate up, how's the body going to know it has to improve? And that's just a funny mentality. It's a very outdated Western physiological mentality, which says you basically have to suffer and prove to your body you are a failure before you will improve. And modern science that shows that's actually not the case. You can just do gentle exercise, like go for a regular walk each day, and people's health will improve tremendously, and their fitness. But people think that they have to prove to their body that they're incapable of doing something to make their muscles tear, to make their muscles fail, before their body's actually going to see the need to improve. Whereas, it's fairly obvious, I would have thought, that that's going to make their subconscious emotional body feel that they're actually a failure. And, when are you going to stop telling yourself you're a failure and you've improved enough? And when are you going to start saying, I'm happy with what I've got? And that saying, I'm happy with how I am, that's really the essence of yoga, and the essence of happiness. Really, you have to state it, not to constantly say that something is internally wrong.
Yeah. No pain, no gain is a complete myth.
It's more like, the better statement, I think, is no pain, no brain. That's the way I think most people who think that, actually, maybe you should state that about them. No, it's really a myth, but that myth is being propagated through the world still today.
And still, I'd say majority of, not just yoga, but exercise, majority of people are having their sympathetic nervous system activated, especially CrossFit. Yeah. And I see patients, they cannot lose weight when they're doing such high intensity exercise. And I think the number one hurdle to losing weight is stress. So their sympathetic nervous system is activated too much. And again, with the breathing you mentioned before, definitely I think one good indicator, would you agree, is if you're breathing through your mouth, that's going to activate the sympathetic nervous system.
Yes.
And can you also activate it through the nose if you're just nasal breathing?
I think that one of the good things about nasal breathing is that it stimulates the nitric oxide. And nitric oxide is a circulatory enhancer. And if you enhance your circulation, you probably won't have to make your heart beat so fast to make circulation improve. When the heart rate increases to improve circulation, that alone will stimulate the flight or fight response. And so if you're breathing through your mouth, you're probably going to do two things. One is you're going to breathe more than normal, and because the mouth will suck in air much easier. And two, you're going to not secrete the nitric oxide, which will improve circulation without the heart. And if you do breathe more than normal, also you're going to get more hungry. And that hunger is not something which is going to nourish you and actually give you more energy. It's just going to be hunger that's going to balance the pH change that will happen with overbreathing, because the more you breathe, the more you blow off carbon dioxide, and the less carbon dioxide, the less carbonic acid, the less acidity you have in your body. The more you breathe, the more alkaline you are. And the body doesn't like alkalinity, of course. It likes to be neutral. So people who breathe more than normal will tend to crave acidic foods just to balance their acidity. Sorry, just to balance their pH, and in eating more, then they're definitely not going to lose weight. But the funny thing is, if someone cannot put on weight, if they breathe more than normal, then they will also stimulate their sympathetic nervous system, and that will turn off their digestive system and make it difficult for them to put on weight. So that mentality of stimulate the fight or fight response, stretch more, tense more, get your heart rate up, breathe more, will make someone who's fat probably stay fat, and someone who's skinny probably stay skinny.
Yeah, and it's not just quickly, it's not just with exercise, it's with our sympathetic nervous system is activated way too much. We're not designed to be under the gun so much and have flight or fight activated. And even people eating, like, I don't care if you're eating the best organic Ayurvedic food, if you're eating it in front of your desk quickly, in front of the computer or on the bus, your rest and digest, your parasympathetic nervous system is not activated, so you cannot digest it. So.
No, it's true. I have to catch myself sometimes eating too fast, because I know I'm probably not going to digest the food properly if I'm chomping and stomping. And a couple of times the last few years, I caught myself biting my gum, which is something really, which is a sign that you're eating way too fast. If you're biting yourself.
Bite from nature, saying.
Yes, yeah. So definitely, if people eat at their desk or eat in front of a television, which is very, very common, especially what the television is showing you is going to get your heart rate up, which all you have to do is turn on the news, and that doesn't exactly promote relaxation, like.
And the EMFs and the blue light,
of course,
stressing the body out.
So true, Dylan.
You don't have to be in a fight with someone or an argument to get stressed. You can just sit in front of.
It's funny because when we're at school, everyone is taught about the flight or fight response, but the way it's often projected in school is in our primitive life when we were cave people and we had to face the saber-toothed tigers. Then, when faced with the saber-toothed tiger, we would enter a state of flight or fight. And
twice a month or something.
Twice a month. It would happen twice a month supposedly, but people think now it doesn't happen at all because we don't have saber-toothed tigers. But of course, I know I've got saber-toothed bank, saber-toothed relationships, saber-toothed children. These are much worse. They're much more threatening, and turn on the saber-toothed news and you're really in trouble,
Beautiful. And this is very interesting now, I'm sure you're aware of. There's a lot of people promoting hyperventilation, such as the Wim Hof method, and a lot of these kind of shamanic healers or sound healers will promote that. So what's your say on that? I mean, I've done the sound healing personally, and you feel like you're high.
Yes.
That's, I think, one thing why the shamanic people like it.
Yes.
And the Wim Hof one's an interesting one. I mean, I'm okay with the cold thermogenesis for some people, not everyone.
Yes.
But the hyperventilation, I'm not so sure about.
I love Wim Hof as a person. He's a great guy, and I've spoken to him at length on the telephone. I've yet to meet him in person, but I look forward to it one day. And the problem is not with Wim; it's the way people learn things. And so what Wim is teaching is a very advanced yoga technique, which he's made simpler, and it is a very good version of a complex yoga technique made simple. But the way people learn is always problematic. They interpret. You see, so the Wim Hof method really is three things. One, it is hyperventilation. 2, that hyperventilation is followed by hypoventilation, and then 3, the cold treatment afterwards. And if you do all 3, well, the cold is then very accessible, and the hypoventilation, breathing less than normal or not breathing for a significant period after hyperventilating, actually becomes, it makes it much easier to do the cold and balances the hyperventilation problems that can arise. But if you give any person a bunch of instructions and you say, like if I say to you right now, I want you to remember the sequence 1, 2, 3, 15, 27, 52, 91, and 3,226, 5,221. And then you say, how much do you remember of that? And they say, give me a reminder. You say, well, it started with 1. Now do 1 and then continue. Then they'll generally do the 1 because you've just reminded them. And then after that, they'll be lost. They might even forget, or they might think that, well, we've done enough. At least we did the first step. So if you teach people, you have to hyperventilate and then hypoventilate, not breathe at all, and then do something else. They will do the hyperventilation, which, as you said, will lead to loss of blood to the brain, which means you start to be a bit less clear. You become a bit spaced out, a bit giddy, and it's very easy then to forget what number 2 is. And if you do forget number 2, then you forget an important step, which I believe has to be learnt before you do number 1. And anyone can hyperventilate, but can you hypoventilate? I often say to my students, it's easy to do 5 full breaths in 1 minute, but can you do 1 breath in 5 minutes? And so I believe if you're going to teach someone something like the Wim Hof method, a safer way of giving it to a large group who you can't monitor, 500 people at once as easily as you can monitor one person, you would teach them first how to hypoventilate, get them practicing, holding their breath for 1, 2, 3 or 4 minutes, and then emphasize the importance of that, and then teach the Wim Hof method. And I think if it's done that way, it's very good. And I believe that he would teach it that way if he had a few people. But I have met people who've come from his training where they had 500 people in the course. And when I said, how was it for them? They said, it was quite amazing. We got really spaced out and dizzy after the hyperventilation. And I said, but didn't you hold your breath afterwards? And they said, no. And I said, but surely you held your breath. Oh, no, I don't think so. And I said, but he would have told you to hold your breath. But I'm sure he did. But they seem to have completely forgotten or didn't realize. And then the press doesn't make it better, because then you hear on the press also that this is a hyperventilation technique. But it really isn't just hyperventilation plus the hypoventilation. And if done like that, I have no problems with it, provided people learn all 3. Or 2 at least, hyperventilation and hypo. But when we're talking about just the exercises for hyperventilation by itself, look, there are some benefits. You can actually stimulate your nervous system to the point that you become hypersensitive. And in the 70s, they called it rebirthing. And so, yes, you can possibly relive some ancient traumas, including the trauma of birth, if that's called a trauma. And maybe that's a good thing. Or maybe you're just going to relive a trauma and have it twice rather than once, because there are people who did hyperventilation, and I've spoken to many of them, and they just felt that although they relived the trauma, experiencing it twice wasn't actually a way of resolving the trauma. It just made them have more problems. And many people I spoke to who went to those sort of classes came back the following week finding out that they've now broken up with their partner and or left their family, and that doesn't necessarily help your life. On a physiological level, I think hyperventilation is a big problem, and although there may be some limited benefits on a psychological level that may let you access altered states mentally, physiologically you are reducing blood flow to the brain, you're reducing the transfer of oxygen from the lungs to the blood, you're hyperstimulating the nervous system, which possibly leads to flight or fight response and thus turns off internal organ systems which give you longevity, and you're going to be reducing, via the Bohr effect, the entry of oxygen into the cells, which will mean that the cells can only metabolize glucose then on an anaerobic level as opposed to the aerobic level, which means then you'll need up to 19 times as much sugar to get the same amount of energy, and you'll basically have 19 times less energy than the people who metabolize sugar with oxygen and get oxygen into the cells. And to me, this won't cause cancer, but it really predisposes you to cancer and diabetes,
because stress is a massive cause for these, and
yes,
it's activating your stress response.
Yes.
And also, then there's the benefits of hypoventilation, which I've discovered through your teachings. It's really beautiful, and to be able to breathe less.
Yes.
I love, Simon always says in his classes, breathe less, tense less, stretch less, and eat less. He sometimes says at the end.
The benefits of hypoventilation are the exact opposite of the things I just mentioned. The less you breathe, you'll be able to bring more blood to the brain, more oxygen from your lungs to your blood. You'll calm the nervous system. You'll be able to make oxygen enter your cells and create 19 times as much ATP for each sugar molecule that you metabolize, and this makes you less hungry as well.
And it also provides this sense of less neediness with everything, and same with the less eating. As a culture, we generally eat too much.
Yes.
We're reliant on it as energy. So when we're less reliant on breathing and food, we capture this capability of less neediness and not so reliant on these things.
Less addictions.
Yeah, there's addictions people who go out and need food in their bags just in case, be free, travel light.
Yes. Well, one of the big things in the philosophy of yoga is the notion that you should make habits that are good habits and break habits that are bad habits, and the idea that habit in general is not a good thing. So habit means another way of saying addiction, and on a cellular level, the more addictions you have, the more the cell membrane becomes bound with receptors that are only for addiction, and then you disallow the possibility of having entry points for nutrition and exit points for things that have to leave the cell on a cellular level, the more things you are addicted to. And so to get rid of any sort of addiction is a good idea, really, and it's what yoga says.
And as well as the breathing and the stress response, what we can call Hatha Yoga, can we call it, or can we say exercise is like a Hatha Yoga?
We can say that pretty much every technique that is used in modern exercise I have seen used by Hatha yogis in India and the equivalent in China. Every exercise technique can be called a technique used in Hatha Yoga, but how it's used in Hatha Yoga to create yoga is not always the way it's used in Western stuff.
And just this is so it's so prevalent amongst even not just exercise, but the yoga communities. How many yoga classes do you go to and the teacher's telling you to keep breathing, keep breathing?
Yes.
And I highly recommend everyone to get to one of Simon's workshops or classes. I'll put in the show notes where he teaches all around the world. And really, as I said in the beginning, it revolutionizes people's yoga practice. Because can you talk about that? People who have trained with, maybe top Iyengar teachers or top Hatha Yoga teachers, and they come to you and you say, actually, no, you shouldn't be doing this. And I've heard you say you've said once, and I'm sorry to all the people who I taught 20 years ago because I taught you wrong.
Yes. Yeah. I often have apologized because every year I understand more, and some things that I've said 20, 30 years ago have a limited truth, but in the global perspective, they may not be the best things to do. I'm learning with the years to not say anything is wrong as such, because there is no wrong or right, but just what is your purpose. And if your purpose is simply to stretch out some muscles, there's many ways you can do it, including some that are quite aggressive. But if that's purely your aim, then do it. But if you care about the state of your mind or the state about your physiology, and you consider that to be important, then there are maybe better, more balanced way of doing things. So now I look much more for balance, which for me is an expression of satya in yoga, or truthfulness, honesty, like running an honest business. It's a balanced approach. And so, it seems that many times I've met people who come to me having done other yogic trainings, and they leave the class going, wow, this is the exact opposite of what I've been taught. And I'm not saying that what they've been taught is wrong. It's just that it may not be leading to yoga. It might be leading to an imbalance, which may give them one benefit and take away something else. So, for example, going back to, the things we do in exercise and the things that some people do in yoga, like hyperventilation. I've met Hatha Yogis who will actually breathe and hyperventilate through an entire asana practice. And it's not wrong. And for them, they actually balance it perfectly fine. They'll breathe in a very loud, what seems like aggressive way through an entire 1 hour practice. And if the average person did this, they'd be very dizzy, nauseous, queasy afterwards. And perhaps the Indian Hatha Yogi is as well. But the Indian Hatha Yogi then will balance that 1 hour of hyperventilation by sitting in perfect stillness in a meditative posture where you will not see them move. You will not even be able to detect any movement or breathing while they sit for maybe 2 hours in meditation. Whereas the Western yogi who does that type of practice might only be maybe doing a 10-minute shavasana afterwards to try and balance. Then they'll go balance it by sitting in front of the computer and eating lots of food. So there's definitely no wrong practice, and certainly all the practices we see in modern Western exercise, I've seen in the Indian, Chinese methods which bring you to a state of yoga, but they're always balanced with something else.
And these exercises, as you said, they will get some benefit. Like, I mean, a common one is to look muscular and look good. Yeah. You will get that from exercise, from strenuous exercise. Yes. But we're seeing now injuries more. All these rugby players are not lasting as long as they used to.
No, they never really lasted. The ones and it's getting worse now, actually.
Because I think that's also because of the EMF and the blue light they're exposed to.
Yes.
Causing that.
And steroid use and stuff like that. Yeah. No, athletes don't generally do that well. The people who do well into longevity are the ones who did not do the high impact sports when they were younger, did not do the intense cardio and stuff which made their heart race. It's funny, because we're in Australia, this concept of cardio is a funny one, because Australia is actually very big in sport, and around the world it's recognised as being big. For a very small country, we do very well in the Olympics. We actually rank in the Olympics, whereas really for a country so small, we shouldn't rank at all. But, Australian physiotherapists and Australian sports is regarded quite highly in the world. And so around the world, people generally talk about cardio. But cardio is as Australian as saying going for a barbie rather than barbecue. And so cardio is short for cardiovascular. And so when you do good cardio work, you're actually meaning to do good cardiovascular work. And cardio means the heart, vascular means blood vessels. So for me, good cardiovascular work means, can you improve the function of the blood vessels? Can the blood vessels themselves improve their ability to carry blood rather than the heart taking all the strain? And I've got a paper which has yet to be published with Professor Mark Cohen at RMIT University, which is the 12 different ways that you can move blood through the body. Only one of those is the heart. And if you can actually minimize the use of the heart, which will necessarily imply the stimulation of the sympathetic nervous system, and utilize the other 11 methods to move blood through the body, then there is a much greater balance. But the emphasis, of course, in the West has been on cardio. And if it's just increasing heart rate, that's not healthy.
So that's a much better definition of exercise. It's increased blood flow in all areas of our body for greater healing and greater, not only heal and increase the longevity and feel good.
Yes.
Rather than get muscles and look good. By the way, which you'll still get.
It's a byproduct.
With the problem.
Yes. The way I look at it is, if I talk about the general global purpose of yoga, it's to recognize that we're all connected as one family in love. It sounds very, very soppy. But then if I have to say, how do you do this on a physiological level? Well, it's to make energy and loving information flow through the body. Well, how can I say that scientifically as opposed to a soppy way? It's to improve the activity of the cardiovascular system. So you minimize the stress in the heart, make the heart beat less, but still make the blood flow, and emphasize the activity of the parasympathetic nervous system and utilize the enteric nervous system while minimizing an overuse of the sympathetic nervous system. Still, of course, you have to learn to use and keep activity occasionally in the sympathetic nervous system. But as you were suggesting before, like the cave people, maybe twice a month being faced with a saber-toothed tiger. One revealing study that came out recently, which reflects this, is that physiologists, exercise physiologists, have realized and published papers suggesting that if, say, an Olympic runner were to run for 100 minutes, then to get the best results, to get them to the next Olympics, you want to get them only for 10 minutes should they not be able to talk. For at least 80 minutes, they should be able to talk normally, like you and I are talking now while sitting. And for maybe 10 minutes, they might talk a bit laboured, but for only 10 minutes out of 100 should you not be able to talk. And that not be able to talk might suggest sympathetic nervous system, as opposed to being able to talk naturally, being parasympathetic. But if I have to take that one step further, it's not just 10% of the time you want sympathetic nervous system. I think that is going to help get people to the next Olympics, but they don't really care about how long they're going to live after that, and often they don't do that good. So maybe really, if you consider that most people's life is filled with ongoing stress, then maybe take that into account, and maybe on an exercise level, maybe only 1% of the time going into a state of flight or fight. And that's certainly what some of these studies are suggesting on the idea of high impact interval training, but maybe even that's excessive. I read one recently that said that you only need about 15 minutes a week of resistance training, for example, to actually improve strength and flexibility.
And it's so, because, a lot of people are giving their time of the day for themselves, some self-care time as exercise. So really, if you want to break your day up to have your self-time and some self-care time, do some real exercise, as Simon's suggesting, and, don't go for an hour when you're stressing your body out. Give yourself some rest and stress-free time.
Yes.
With some, proper practice. And just one more thing on that. And I've also heard you say, we should not go directly from the teachings of, say, Iyengar, because their bodies were different to ours. We cannot say Iyengar's teaching this pose. Well, maybe that's not relevant for us, and we should adjust it. And that's what you've done a fantastic job with the yoga synergy practices. You're still doing those same muscle movements and certain vertebrae, positions, but in a slightly different posture.
In a slightly different way to adapt them for the Western body. Look, what you say is true. Maybe Iyengar was probably the worst person to talk about there, because he actually did take into account the modern Western body much more than other traditional yogis. So he worked a lot with people in Indian cities, for example, who had been living on chairs for ages, and they'd lost a lot of their naturalness. But even Mr. Iyengar, I think maybe didn't take into account the Western mind as much as perhaps he should have. Basically, if I had to say to someone, go and learn yoga from someone, then I wouldn't usually suggest going to India. If you want to learn the philosophy of yoga, go to India. And all you have to do is go live in an Indian village and see how Indian families work. This is beautiful. And if you want to see master yogis, go to India. But not to learn off them how to be physical and physiologically and mentally approaching it.
Yoga.
Because they don't understand, as you said generally, just how physically useless we are in the West. We're very stiff, we're very weak, and many of the joints they're flexible and strong in. And also they don't understand the physiology of the Westerner, being a physiology of just total stress, and the internal organ systems are really mucked up. I'm talking about traditional Indians at the moment, now, which there are not that many of them left now, but the ones who really live in a natural environment.
Still, there's, we don't squat when we go to the toilet.
No, exactly.
And
many of them don't either anymore.
Yeah. There's still a lot to do.
And, sure.
And, even headstands here is quite unsafe to practice. They've been carrying stuff on their heads.
Yes. Yes.
And I mean, headstands is a big one that I think is overpracticed.
Yes,
Would you say?
definitely, yeah.
Causing issues with the neck and the cervix.
Oh,
as well.
if you see in India, even in modern India, in places like Goa, which is a beautiful tourist destination, I mean, I go there frequently still, and I'm still meeting up with lovely women who helped me 30 years ago, and they would be in their 50s 30 years ago, carrying what I know would be heavy baskets, say a 60-kilo basket. I would have to get a friend to lift a 60-kilo basket of fruit onto their heads, and they would walk for 2 or 3 hours on the beach with this thing which is heavier than their bodies. And yet, recently I've met these same women again in their 80s, and they're still there on the same beach, carrying more than their body weight on their head for several hours a day. And I don't think these people are going to have a problem doing headstand or shoulder stand.
Okay.
Compared to us.
And I'd love you to talk about someone who came into both of our lives, your life more than me, who was very exciting. I found very exciting. You introduced me to him at one of your courses. You brought him as a special guest, Master Zen Hang Yung.
Zhen Hua Yang, yes.
Hang Yang.
Yeah.
And I mean, can you tell me, I find his story very fascinating, and I like most of his teachings. Would you explain a bit about his background? He's got a very interesting background.
Master Zhen Hua Yang, he's an amazing man. He came into my life about 10 years ago, and he has a history which is quite phenomenal. His background was he went to the Shaolin Temple when he was a very young man, and then young boy actually. I think he was 3 or 4 when he first was introduced to it, and then in his teens he went to the Wudan Temple, which was more of an internal martial arts style. But his family actually taught him as well, especially his grandfather. I think he thinks of as his main teacher. And his grandfather was of the lineage of the last of the bodyguards of the Emperor of China. So they have a very high teaching. He himself is a 1 in a billion type people. I think he's really quite special, and his ability to understand his own body is phenomenal, and he's got an amazing ability to help others as well. And I have tremendous respect for him, and so he's been very, very good for me in terms of helping me understand how to restore natural movement in someone, and so I've really enjoyed sharing things with him over the last 10 years.
And he's got this amazing capability to harness energy and direct energy.
Yes, yeah.
I mean, and guys, he's in Bankstown, Sydney. You can access him easily, and he runs courses with Simon in the Gold Coast occasionally. And
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I'll be doing a course with him at the end of this year. Usually once a year I teach with him. And he's, I think he really made me appreciate that, energy is the physiological key to yoga, and that key is often being lost or blocked in the West by over-tensing and overstretching. Yeah. And I've really managed to understand that physically myself, and now I can explain it to other people and demonstrate it to other people much better.
Yeah. Okay, great. And I know it's hard to say without a video, without you showing some postures, but how can people restore their bodies to become more natural? What steps can they take? Okay,
well, one of the ways that I think I can explain it best is to look at how we move naturally and what we can and can't do naturally. And for example, we cross our arms very simply. You just lift one hand on the opposite shoulder, second hand on the other shoulder, and we can do that without any external forces. We just use our arms to do it, and it doesn't feel like stretching. It doesn't feel like tensing. Yet you could not really stretch the elbow more. If you did stretch the elbow when you folded your arms into cross arms position, you would sort of think immediately something's wrong with my elbow. But when we take our legs into a lotus position, usually in the West, people do that by pulling one hand on one foot and yanking the foot across the opposite thigh. This, of course, is not what they do in the East. In a traditional bodied person, someone who's been brought up in a natural environment, will cross their legs on the floor as easily as we cross our arms. And so when you do this actually triggers neurological reflexes, spinal reflexes, which create a possibility of developing strength, while not focusing on tensing muscles. It develops flexibility while not feeling strong stretch. You get relaxation while movement, relaxation of the antagonist, the lengthening muscle, while not having to lie on the floor. It also promotes blood flow without getting your heart rate up. And so natural movement is active movement. When you can move from one position to another, the natural body will do it without the assistance of external forces. So my suggestion as a first step in Hatha Yoga is move actively. A second suggestion is to move from your core.
So just to clarify again, when Simon says move actively, he means without external forces such as your your limbs and your gravity.
Yep. And momentum, yeah. So
momentum,
move actively means move with your own body's volition rather than using external forces such as gravity, momentum, or one limb pulling another. And if you do that at least as the first step, then you improve your natural body.
And I can definitely vouch for that. And one simple example without showing a video of it is just your spine, you're twisting your spine, twisting your back without putting your hands on the floor and pushing your torso to the side. Just move without your arms.
It's a big difference, yes. The second thing is moving from your core. And in the West, this is very controversial because many people have had this drummed into them that you should engage your core, that you should tighten your core, that you should have good, strong abs. And actually, the more you tighten your core consciously, the more you limit the movement of your spine. And this will actually, inhibit strength and flexibility if you do this. And so if you move your arm to the left, the basic concept is move your lower abdomen or your lower spine to the left first. And that will actually give you better strength and flexibility, and it'll help your internal organs work better and your spine move better. Move from the core, don't lock the core. It's also this core, the region between the pubic bone, the navel, the L5S1 and the pelvic floor, between the diaphragm and the pelvic diaphragm.
In Ayurveda we call apanavata.
Yes, and in yoga we call it the kanda. And in China we call it the dantian, and in Japan they call it the hara. This in the West is the seat of the enteric nervous system, which is this, we can sometimes call it the action brain as opposed to the thinking brain in our head. And it is a large plexus of nerves it's bigger than the parasympathetic or sympathetic nervous system, but yet forms part of the autonomic nervous system. And it's actually more nervous tissue than is in the spinal cord. And to move from that point is a real key to natural movement and restoring natural movement, and actually a real thing that will give you much better Hatha Yoga practice as well as much better exercise practice of any sorts.
Beautiful. And also relaxing it more. It's a common tension point for people who hold stress. So that's your lower abdomen, just relax.
Yeah.
Be like I love how Simon says, be like a baby's belly, be like a Buddha's belly. Especially women will hold it in, and that's as well contributing to menstrual issues. So just relax your belly, put your awareness on it, breathe into it.
Yes.
That will help so many things.
To clarify that, it's like what you want is to always feel that your lower abdomen is relaxed enough to breathe into it. And, as a general rule, if you're sitting, you don't have to tighten your abdomen. So it can actually physically be relaxed, and you can breathe naturally into the lower abdomen. But when you're moving, what you want to check is that you can still breathe into your lower abdomen. But in some movements, the abdomen will actually become firm at a point when it needs to firm. But what you want to feel, not so much that it's always flaccid, because it's important to use your abdomen, but that you can breathe into it. So another key feature that I would recommend to people beginning yoga or trying to do exercise is to always check that you can breathe naturally. And although fancy breathing is a useful thing to learn, it's a later step. And I think most people just need to restore natural breathing and practice natural breathing in most of their exercise. That's a third step. And then a fourth step that maybe I like to include into people's movement is to move in a fluid way. So they're not just moving back and forth, which is like a car driving back and forth and accelerating and braking and reserving and reversing and going forward, which is very jarring for anyone in the car and also very energy inefficient. But to learn to move in a way where you never go back and forth, but the body moves more naturally in circular fluid fashions. And if you do this, then it's energy efficient, it's much less tension on the joints, but you must do it in a way where you're not feeling strong stretch or tension, otherwise that can lead to imbalance as well. So if I summarize then, if you want a good tip to to doing better yoga or better exercise. 4 things. 1, move actively. 2, move from the core. 3, breathe naturally. And 4, move in a fluid way through 3-dimensional space with all your body, especially your core.
Yeah, wonderful. And what about some for outside of exercise and yoga?
Outside of exercise and
How
yoga.
can people, for example, if they're sitting in an office for 8 hours a day, what are some things they can do to help their body?
Every hour you need to get off your chair and move around. And if you can learn some simple spinal movements, I have a beautiful, simple spinal movement sequence that takes 90 seconds to do. And if anyone wants to contact me on Facebook or, Simon
at
as well. YouTube, Simon at yogasynergy.com is my email, or you can look for Simon Borg-Olivier on Facebook or Instagram, Simon Synergy, and I'm happy to send you a link to a simple 90-second sequence. You can do it any time. But if I can't give you that, then I really recommend get up. Go for a walk. When you walk, relax your abdomen, let your hips move. Move your shoulders. And if you can't do anything else at your desk, at least rotate your shoulder blades forward, backward, alternating left and right side like bicycle wheels. That makes such a difference to the health of your spine. And they're hot little tips that may be useful. And
that spinal movements I love so much. I do it every day. I just drove from Sydney yesterday, and definitely whenever I get out of the car, I do it, just moving my spine in every direction. It's wonderful. It's such fun. The first time I came to a class with Simon, my friends were telling me, you got to see this guy. I hardly ever done yoga. And as Simon does, he's very, very kind, and how he meets everyone for the first time who attend his classes. And he came to me, he goes, hello, what's your name? I said, Dylan. He says, Dylan, do you like dancing? I said, yeah. He's like, okay, well, if you like, that's good. If you like dancing, this will be like dancing. And we did that. These spinal sequences are like that. It's a beautiful dance, but
it's simple. I don't want to threaten people by saying they have to learn to dance, because some people get freaked out if I say they're going to dance. No, these are simple. I teach 8 simple postures, which are actually 4 opposing pairs of postures, which is not hard to remember. 4 things, and if you join them, it's a little bit like join the dots as a child. And when you join the dots as a child, it might be 8 dots that look like the straight lines between them, but as an adult, the dots become more fluid and that's what I'm asking, that's all. But you can make something a little bit softer, a little bit more fluid, get rid of the sharp edges.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you so much. Anything else you want to say? Anything on your mind that's you want to share with people particularly?
Dylan, it's such a pleasure to talk with you, and it's such a wonderful thing for me to feel that the many years now we've known each other, and that you've really gone from strength to strength. And you were a fledgling when I met you. You were much younger, and you looked like you had fantastic potential and a bright mind. And what I see is that you've become like a brilliant, sturdy tree in the forest that's actually giving beautiful sustenance to the people around you. And your practice is remarkable, and what you're sharing in your writing and your teaching and your treatments is remarkable. And so maybe I can conclude with my philosophy of life is that really to embody the philosophy of yoga, I think the main purpose we have to be here is to do 3 things. 1 is to enjoy our life. And that's something which you can always choose. It's an expression of santosha, if you like. And the second thing is that we should look after our bodies, because they are the heaven on earth we have, and we should respect and honor them and take care of them. And then when we do those 2 things, we can do the next important thing, which is to help other people enjoy their lives. And that's what I see you doing. It's what I'm trying to do. So enjoy your life, look after your body, help other people enjoy their lives. And then we can really resonate this idea that the world is a large family in love, living in an ocean of love that we can actually bathe in and share. Thank
Beautiful.
you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very, very, very much.
Thanks for listening, guys. Hope you enjoyed the podcast. If you want to check out Simon's stuff, you can see the link below, Simon Borg-Olivier. And don't forget, if you want to schedule a consultation with me, we can do Skype consultation, talk about your health, get to the underlying cause of disease, and make you realize the essence of your health. Please subscribe to the podcast and leave a review. I love reading them. Wish you well.